All right, today is the day. We're back in the studio looking at the Arete project and a couple of things been going on outside that project. Namely, I've been involved in the architectural world for a long time. Back in 2008 when the housing bubble burst, I kind of got out of that world a little bit. Still on occasion I have a contractor that comes to me and asks me to do some house plans. So working on a couple of sets of house plans. I don't think it's going to slow me down too much in the schedule, but it does give me some cash, and money always actually accelerates the project, so it's always good to have some more money back in it. Speaking of money in this project, I've mentioned that I'm trying to do this project for $25,000 in material costs, and right now we're still doing pretty good. The original cash, $25,000 is gone, except I actually spent $6,000–7,000 on some machinery and some tools. So I do have that money still left. I'm just gonna have to come up with that cash myself, but that's not counted against the car. Also, I'm gonna go over budget a little bit on the engine because I found out that sensors and a few of the things I put on the engine are way more expensive than I ever thought they would be. You go down and buy a sensor for your Honda and it's $30, but when you're trying to find sensors to match for racing applications, they seem to know that you're kind of hooked because you need something particular, and so they're usually around $100 rather than the 30 that's expected. So getting that engine going is going to cost me a little bit more, maybe about $1,500 more than I thought. So we're going to still say $25,000 in the budget. I always knew that once that $25,000 was gone and the car was running, that I would probably start spending more on doing things to it that were beyond what was originally planned. But anyway, too much talking. Let's go see the action. Let's go see what we've been working on.
I started on the front subframe. You can see here the bird mouth of the tubes. This thing's like the rear. This is made of all just straight 90-degree connections. Nothing in the fancy trying to make curves. All the end plates will have captured nuts which will hold the rest of the sheet metal bodywork. Here is it on the bench getting welded together. I'm not going to go over this too much because I'll show it all in a complete detail. Just giving you a couple of shots to see what's been going on with this. Like I said, we'll have a full video on the subframe when we start doing the suspension. Anyway, this is the way it looks at present. Also, been working on the project of my 5-axis CNC machine. Putting on the X-axis slide rails, leveling them out with some aluminum filled epoxy. This is the way you can keep them from binding by trying to build it on a frame like this is welded. You're not going to get it perfectly flat, and instead of trying to grind it flat, you're just using the epoxy to level it up. With the epoxy, you're able to torque it to just into the limits of slightly binding, back them off, and check your slides. And if it's sliding okay, then you know that you can let the epoxy set and do the final adjustment on your wrenches. And of course, the big thing I've been working on is starting to do the laminations on the tub section of the car. Starting off with some real lightweight fabrics using a 3-ounce satin weave. Now this is an E-glass cloth. You can't find this really lightweight satin in S-glass. It would be nice, but I think they probably figure that if you're using this lightweight of a fabric, you're not trying to gain any kind of structural advantage. Of course, I'll go over later on in a FRP video why you use these super lightweight fabrics on the first layers. Of course, that is to prevent print through of the fibers. Like I said, I'll try to explain that in much detail in a better video. So you try to use as large of pieces as you can. Of course, the width of this car is not going to work for the 36-inch wide fabric. It's wider, of course, already. But the fewer joints you can have, that's also creates a print through problem. Not too critically, because like I said, this fabric is so thin that you're just not going to get that kind of a problem. So there will be some joints, but we probably will never see any problem with those. But as I said, going on with these 2 layers of this 3-ounce satin weave E-glass, and working it in with a brush, the epoxy, and then going over it with a squeegee. And I just use old credit cards, the squeegees. They seem to work way better than the flexible rubber squeegees, which tend to drag a little bit on the fiberglass cloth. And if you have, wonderful credit like me, you get credit cards every day. Well, you get the junk mail and there's credit cards in there. Awful good of them to send those to me. Following up those 2 layers of that satin weave, going on to the S-Glass. I've put on 4 layers of a 4-ounce S-Glass. And you'll see later on I'll show you that I lay up a sample also so that I can test and make sure I am arriving at kind of the stiffness that I'm hoping to achieve. I did not with this amount of cloth, but we'll see that later on in the video. So right now you're just seeing me going up and laying that up. And I'm mixing up some Q cells and some epoxy. You see the consistency, kind of like thick peanut butter. I'm going in and filling some of the real hard angles once I've got 4 layers of cloth on there that gives the structure to the face side. Will be the finished side of the car. But I'm going to go ahead and fill those hard angles so that it's a little bit easier to lay the cloth over. Otherwise, you have to keep working and working those hard double angles here you see around the windshield frame. So I'm just going to fill them in with this Q-cell filler. It is not super structural, but we have enough structure by those 4 layers of cloth that we can go ahead and fill that. And then when I go ahead and cover them with a peel ply and smooth them out with my finger. And what this is going to do is going to create a super smooth surface that I won't have to go back and sand over. And then when I go to start laying my next layers of cloth, they will bridge those hard angles and I won't have to worry about stippling the fiberglass into those. Nice and smooth now, the next layers are going to go right over it. Now you see me here, how I'm having to work around this mold is stepping through and standing in the windshield area. But I'm making a template now. After I have those laminates sort of set up, I'm getting ready to go ahead and cut the Nomex honeycomb. So making myself a template, because we want to get that Nomex on the first shot as it's kind of expensive stuff. Just took a piece of paper there, laid it into the body, trimming it about 2 inches short of where the bends around the windows are. That way the fiberglass that comes over the honeycomb will have about 2 inches to bond to the old fiberglass layers, and then make a wrap around the flanges. I don't know how much narration it takes for me to explain cutting the template out, but here we go, trimming it out. Now the trick with the Nomex is that you can't have the sharp bend of your cut. You need to bevel it. And so while you're watching me here trim this thing out, I'm going to explain how this works. There is so many methods you can do this, but I have found the only true and tried way that really seems to work well is a sander. So once you have this Nomex marked out, you can just cut it out with a pair of scissors, and even though it crushes the Nomex is so resilient that it just pops right back up, and cutting it with the scissors in that compression doesn't harm it at all. But that leaves you with that 90-degree bend. So what we're gonna have to do is, once we have it all cut out, we have to bevel it. That's where I said where the sander is gonna come into play. I've tried a belt sander and a little file sander. It just doesn't seem to work as well as taking a Makita grinder with these flapper discs that you're probably really familiar with, 60, 80 grit, and then you have to hold the Nomex down or the sander is just going to flip it right out of its way. But if you can get a piece of wood, and here I've got a piece of cardboard to hold it down, and just run that sander over it and bevel that thing off at about 45 degrees. And as you're working, you don't want exactly 45, you want it to be a slight radius at the top of that 45 as well. So it's nice and smooth turn as that fiberglass cloth that's going to cover this Nomex is going to roll around that edge. Anyway, grind it down with the sander, make sure you hold it down tight, and you get a nice, beautiful edge. Stepping into that windshield again. just a trial fit, because now we're going to have to go back. I'm going to add 2 more layers of a 6-ounce Sclass cloth for my final stiffness on the first layers, and then go to another satin weave over the Nomex and 3 layers of the 6-ounce Sclass on the backside. Here's the sample that I laid up, and you can see, of course you can't tell how much pressure I'm putting on it, but just a little too flexible. But we will stiffen it up by adding a few more layers.
Well, that's a little quick run through of what we've been working on. Hope you enjoyed looking at progress. Anyway, hoping to move on to those other molds and actually getting those and separate them out. And then putting the bulkheads into the tub, put the floor in. That's going to be the exciting part, having the tub sitting there. Maybe we'll throw a bucket seat in there just to sit in it, just to be in the essence of a car. Anyway, thanks for stopping by, and come back and see us again.